You know of the rebellion against the Empire?
Perhaps you referred to the imminent attack on your rebel fleet.
Where is the rebel base?
I didn't know there was anyone willing to stand up against the Empire.
Hello and welcome to Unmistakably Star Wars. In this edition of Rebels Reaction, I'm Tyler.
And I'm Christine.
On this episode, we're reacting to Legacy of Mandalore.
Ooh.
Christine, initial thoughts, one-word reaction.
Disappointing.
Disappointing. Interesting. I'd say my initial thought is kind of overbearing. Not kind of overbearing, but overbearing.
Okay.
So explain your initial thoughts in that one word. Yes.
Well, not from a storytelling point of view, but from a human point of view, I'm disappointed in Sabine's mom. Mm-hmm. That she's so coarse, I guess.
That's the Mandalore way.
I know, but that she betrays her daughter. I would think that she would have more honor. Like, too much honor to betray her family, because Mandalorians are so honorable, but there's obviously more to it than that. So I found that disappointing, and then that she obviously wouldn't lift a finger to help Sabine to beat Gar Saxon. And even Kanan points out, like, you find your traditions more important than your daughter's life. So from a storytelling point of view, she, I think, embodies what it is to be Mandalorian, at least to an extent. A harsh, brazen Mandalorian. But from a human point of view, I just think, what the heck? That's horrible.
It's disappointing.
Yeah, it's disappointing. And then this makes sense from a human standpoint and from a storytelling standpoint. But it's disappointing to me as a fan that Sabine leaves the team.
Yeah. Because,
like, of course she would, once she's made peace with her family, she would stay with them. Of course, her whole reason she was with the Ghost crew was because she was rejected by her family and had to leave and didn't have a family anymore, to an extent. And, of course, now that she's kind of become close to them again and is now going to try to free Mandalore, like, yes, of course she would be staying with her family, but I don't like the thought of her leaving.
Well, the arc or an arc or a theme that has been building not only throughout this season but the previous two seasons is that the Ghost crew is a family.
Yeah. So
the fact that she leaves that family,
suddenly abandons them.
Yeah, but it's, I think throughout this season in particular, the theme or momentum has been building towards the larger picture.
Yeah.
And it's not just kind of these smaller missions that the Ghost Crew is going on that we see in Season 1 and 2, but really what's going on in terms of the overall rebellion as it's coming together.
Yeah, that's true.
So, that, yes, I can see how that is disconcerting or whatever it might be. Disappointing.
Disappointing.
But it's, yeah, again, like you said, from a story point of view, I can see why it's happening. But it is kind of interesting that the tie that was there to the crew is not as strong as it would seem. But at the same time, there's been so much hurt there from Sabine and the rejection from her family that I can kind of understand why she would leap at the opportunity to be with them again.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's kind of where a little bit of my initial reaction comes in, of kind of this overbearing sense of duty from Sabine's standpoint to her family, and kind of the duty to the rebellion.
Yeah.
Which I don't really see as overbearing for her, because she really wants to be a part of that. But the fact that the pressure from her family in various venues, but then kind of the overbearing sense of duty that her mother feels and her brother feels for Mandalore, at the expense of family.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting dynamic that we kind of see throughout the episode of this building towards, or this tension between kind of the honor of home and the honor of family.
Yeah.
Which both Sabine's mother and brother see it as dishonorable what Sabine did by leaving.
Yeah.
Even though what she created was used against the Mandalorians.
Yeah.
So she feels like she betrayed them in that.
And was trying to make up for it by fixing as much as she could.
Yeah. So it's just it's really interesting and kind of fun in this 2-episode arc of Sabine really taking responsibility and then confronting the shadows of her past, or just the dark parts of her past.
Yeah.
So let's jump into the big 3 and kind of talk about major plot points as they go on.
Okay.
We've kind of gotten our overview, but one is family issues, which we've kind of dived into some, but let's go into a little bit more. The initial reception that the Ghost Crew gets.
As soon as they hear that it's her, they try to shoot her down and do.
Yes. And so they're shot down. We learn quickly that Sabine has a brother.
Yeah.
Tristan. And he seems to be kind of understanding of her.
Yeah.
And sympathetic. But also, like, you betrayed us.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do what I can to bring honor back to our family.
Yeah. He seems loving, but he also totes the family line pretty hard. So, actually, this is gonna be mixing of genres, but he reminds me of Regulus Black from Harry Potter, who has a good heart, but gets a little bit too wrapped up in the family politics and makes some poor choices in who he gives his allegiance to.
Yeah. So, with Regulus, Voldemort.
Yep.
With Tristan, Gar Saxon, and the Empire.
Yeah.
And I think the part of the motivation there as well is this kind of mystery surrounding their father. And we don't have a ton of information on really who he is, what his role is, but that he's pretty much a prisoner on Mandalore in everything but name.
Yeah.
So it would seem that he's definitely involved in the politics of what's going on and maybe doesn't agree with it, but is kind of walking that line between not being an outright rebel, but then not really giving in completely to the Empire.
Yeah.
And then we have Ursa, Sabine's mother.
Yeah.
And she seems to kind of be on the further end of what Tristan is.
Yeah.
In her kind of condemnation of what Sabine has done, or Sabine running away.
Yeah.
And just being very, very much of the line of, we're here to fix what you broke.
Yeah. And it's all her fault.
Yeah. And it's just such an interesting piece, and I wish we really had a broader picture or more detail into just how Sabine was put in the situation to create some sort of weapon or weapons, and then how she decided to kind of navigate that situation once she was horrified of what the Empire did as a result.
Yeah, that would probably clear things up. It would probably help us to distinguish whether or not her mom's attitude toward her is at all justified. It seems to us, as supporters of Sabine, like she's just harsh and mean. But there could be extenuating circumstances that actually give her some justification for her actions. But it seems like she's putting a lot of blame on a young teenager who she raised, so she is somewhat responsible for, at least for her belief system. And she's blaming all of their problems on Sabine. Well, not all their problems, but a lot of the situation that they're in on her own daughter, who was a young teenager at the time.
Yeah. So it's... And that kind of leads into number 2 of the big 3, Betrayal. Mm-hmm. And right when we think that Ursa's going to really listen to Sabine and that the dark saber might be a piece that they can rally around, or a symbol that they can rally around, she kind of turns on Sabine in so much as saying that the dark saber really is just a symbol. It's nothing more, and that she probably doesn't even know how to wield it, and that she's willing to give over the Jedi, Kanan and Ezra, in exchange for Sabine's life, or at least a pardon of some kind from Gar Saxon.
Yeah.
So she pretty much calls Gar Saxon, rats out the fact that Sabine's there, and Gar's on his way.
Yeah.
So, what did you think about how Ursa really plays into that opportunity? How she plays her cards there?
Well, how she acts there is part of what's so disappointing to me, because it's not like she gets into a situation where they're coming or they find out and so she has to play her cards. It's she actively pursues Gar Saxon. He has no idea they're there. He has no direct influence over the situation, and she brings him into it to betray her daughter.
Yeah.
It's not that like he shows up and she has to figure out how to handle it. It's she actively goes behind her daughter's back to the person who she knows is just a puppet of the Empire and who is enslaving his own people.
Yeah. I think that there's just such a cultural dynamic that appears in that situation that unlike what we've seen in so much of Rebels, I mean, maybe Hera and her father, a little bit of a similar situation where there's this sense of duty and kind of honor to home and that kind of thing, that there's just this motivation to kind of throw everything away for that.
Yeah. And
Hera kind of works through that. And Sabine doesn't really seem to succumb to that because she's already sort of dealt with it. In so much as she had to leave home, she had to flee because of the situation she found herself in. But her family hasn't dealt with it, and it's so much a piece of the Mandalorian culture that it's hard for them to be able to look at anything other than that honor system that is no longer there for them.
Yeah. I'm really curious to do a little more research and figure out what the Mandalorian honor system actually consists of, because it seems slightly inconsistent. Because honor is so important to them, but then they do things that seem to me as dishonorable.
Yeah, it would be interesting, and I'm sure there's plenty of
information
out there. Maybe not in current canon, but I think that kind of information, that story is building, and we'll continue to get more of it. I would think in the EU there's just
Gotta be
a
plenty.
plethora of resources that kind of dive into that. But I think that kind of plays into some of just the mystique of Mandalore and Mandalorian culture.
It's very regal.
Yes, and we get some of that in Clone Wars, and just kind of some of the mystery that surrounds it. Mm-hmm. Just like Boba Fett as a character.
Yeah. Part of his intrigue is his mystery.
Exactly. So, and I think that's part of what surrounds the piece of Mandalore, and kind of how their society really works and works well, or is deficient.
Yeah. It's still there.
Yes. And then number 3, we have confrontation or showdown with Gar Saxon himself. So he shows up. I find it kind of funny that, and it makes sense from an animation standpoint, but he's the only one. Like, we never see him with his helmet on.
Yeah.
It's just identifying him. Because just like the stormtroopers, there is kind of this faceless person or just zero personality of the masked figure.
Yeah.
And whereas Boba Fett, that creates mystery. When we see a lot of Mandalorians with their helmets on, then there's no uniqueness to them.
Yeah.
So I just, kind of a side note, found that funny and interesting. But he really kind of just repeats what Sabine's mother says, in that the Darksaber is really just a symbol, and you can't wield it, and I'm going to take it from you, and I'll use that symbol for my ends, as opposed to
for Mandalore.
Yeah, for really making a difference.
Yeah.
For the people of Mandalore.
Yeah. Which I gotta say, a side note, the Darksaber is so cool.
It is.
We've seen it enough times that I should be used to it, but still, every time I see it being used, I'm like, holy cow, it's so cool.
It's just so different than any sort of saber we've seen. So it's fun as an artifact.
Yeah.
But this confrontation ensues between Sabine and Gar Saxon, and I think Ursa's initial thought was Sabine would be saved, but of course Gar goes the other direction with that.
Yeah.
And Sabine uses what she learned from Kanan to battle for this saber.
Yeah.
And comes to the point of defeating, or at least subduing, Gar Saxon.
Yeah.
And has the opportunity to kill him.
Yeah.
And chooses not to. And finds victory in that, but then begins to walk away.
Yeah.
And of course, like, it's almost an archetype of the good guy, bad guy fight when the good guy wins. That the bad guy turns around and at the first opportunity, after being spared, tries to kill Sabine.
Yeah.
And I think something that I noticed throughout the entire episode, but particularly in this point, it seemed very cinematic to me.
It did, yeah.
A lot of the different kind of shots that were used, the situations that just visually how it was represented. I don't know if it was because of the setting, but it didn't seem that unique to some of the other worlds that we've seen throughout this show, but just kind of sweeping shots. Some of them felt like they were right out of or very related to the Millennium Falcon in as it was flying around in TFA.
Oh, yeah.
The Force Awakens.
Yes.
And landing in the snow.
Yeah.
So it was just, and this scene in particular seems like it's played out in so many different movies and situations, and it sucked me in. Yeah. Because of the way it was presented. And I honestly thought that Sabine had been shot.
Yeah. Yeah, they did that really well.
And of course, like many other times, Ursa actually shot Gar Saxon instead.
Redeemed herself.
Yes, and after seeing Sabine fight her way to once again having the dark saber, kind of,
and earning it in her eyes.
Yes, gaining that respect, sees it as an opportunity that maybe there is hope for a free Mandalore, whether or not that means that they're helping the rebels.
Yeah.
And Sabine decides to stay.
Yeah.
Which, as you mentioned, is disappointing.
Makes me
for
sad.
you.
I mean, I'm glad but sad.
I'm sure we'll see her again.
I hope so.
I don't think there's any question in that. Probably before the end of the season.
Yeah. I do gotta say, with how, or when Sabine defeats Gar, I like that she says that, I don't remember the quote, but she's not going to do the Mandalorian thing and kill.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a cool, or it feels to me like it's going to be a start to a new Mandalore, or at least new Mandalorian tendencies, instead of always harsh, always aggressive. That, like, she, even though she's not going to be the leader of Mandalore, she's going to be part of the upswing of Mandalore.
Yeah.
It feels like it might be a new type of honor.
Well, I think it may swing, the pendulum may swing back to the way we saw Mandalore initially in the Clone Wars, where they're a peaceful world without really kind of a military bent to them. But then towards the end of the Clone Wars, we see them swing the other way with kind of Maul infiltrating and connecting with groups that really want to restore Mandalore to its former glory. So it's interesting to kind of see that the cultural extremes that Mandalore experiences, and it will be interesting to see where that kind of ends up, and especially if we see Mandalore take a larger role into not only through the original trilogy but beyond. And or if they're just crushed by the Empire. We'll see.
I guess we'll see.
So, your bottom line for this episode.
What do you mean?
What were your final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Okay. Change your wording. Threw me off. My final thoughts. I liked it, even though it was disappointing to me. And I like that we got to see some more background for Sabine and understand more of her story. Makes me sad that fact means that she has ties outside of the Ghost Crew, because even though we've been introduced to these characters in this episode, I don't have emotional ties to them. I have emotional ties to the Ghost Crew, so I want her to stay with them.
Yeah.
But it is cool to see the expansion of her character, her background. And we've always known she had a family and that somehow there is this betrayal, but it's cool seeing the reality of it and her facing that.
Yeah, I would see kind of the bottom line for me being we continue to see this widening of the story. And this is I think a major part of that, especially as I think we're coming to a culminating event of the season with an attack on Lothal. And I think the two stories of this episode and the previous one kind of coming together to be I think a really strong arc for this season of kind of this coming of age for Sabine, and confronting things that were uncomfortable for her, that working through what she really didn't, what she had been avoiding for so long and didn't want to confront, and seeing that really her persistence in kind of pushing through that barrier that her family had set up and she had set up between her family.
Yeah.
So I'll be really curious to see how that plays out as she tries to work towards kind of a broader or a more inclusive Mandalore, or including more of Mandalore in that story, not just Clan Ren.
Yeah.
So, and I wonder if there's going to be more of an emphasis on restoring Mandalore first or helping the rebellion.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Especially with Gar Saxon now gone, likely some sort of power vacuum will exist.
Yeah.
And that could play out very interestingly.
Yeah.
So that wraps up this episode of Rebels Reaction. Be sure to check us out online at unmistakably-starwars.com, our various podcasts that drop throughout the week. On Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Twitter, unmistakably SW, facebook.com/unmistakably-starwars. Until next time, I'm Tyler.
I'm Christine.
May the Force be with you.